Welcome to the Student Astronaut Challenge. This presentation is related to the software setup and operational information that you'll need to get the orbiter and data panels loaded onto your team's PCs and get them up and flying. You should have a copy of the file Softload Download Setup and Operational Information 2020-1A for reference during this presentation. This file can be downloaded from the StudentAstronautChallenge.com website in the Reference Material Coaches Training section. There are 4 programs that you will need to download and set up to run the Student Astronaut Challenge Space Flight Simulation System that your team will need to practice. They are the Orbiter 2010 system, the Orbiter Sound 4.0 add-on system, the Pilot data panels, and the Flight Engineer data panels. Now, the Orbiter 2010 is the all-encompassing system that we use, which we use the shuttle part of. The Orbiter Sound, while it's not required for the competition or for your teams to practice, it certainly adds a significant amount of realism to the flight when you're using the Orbiter software. The Pilot data panels and the Flight Engineer data panels are PowerPoint slideshows that are downloaded to the Pilot computer and the Flight Engineer computer to provide the data screens that they reference during the flight. One important note, all PC software setups that we do during this competition do not modify any of the operating systems on your computer. Now, the first step will be to download the Orbiter 2010 software. What you'll need to do is navigate to the www.orbithanger.com/orbiter.php website. The link is contained within the documentation and it's on the top of this page. About halfway down the page, you'll see a dark gray panel that's labeled 2010-P1. That is the latest 2010 version of Orbiter. While it is not the latest version of Orbiter, which is 2016, it's the one we use during the competition because many of the things that we do are significantly harder to accomplish in the 2016 version. Once you locate the 2010-P1 area on this screen, you'll want to double-click on the Orbiter 100830.zip file. That will download the zip file to the download section of your computer unless you tell it to move somewhere else. After you've gotten Orbiter downloaded, you need to navigate to another site, Dan Steff's Orbiter Mods, to download the Orbiter Sound 4.0 add-on. Once again, this is not a requirement, but it certainly adds a significant amount of realism, and your students will certainly enjoy it. So you need to navigate to the orbiter.dansteff.com website. The full address is at the top of this page. It's also contained within the printed manual that I suggest you have on hand. Once you get onto this page, you'll look for the My Add-ons for Orbiter 2010 plus P1 section. The first one entered should be Orbiter Sound 4.0. Click on the download button on the lower right corner of that blue-gray screen, and it will download it to your PC in the download section, creating Orbiter Sound 40_20121120_setup.exe file. Double-click that file and follow its installation instructions. It will point you to navigating to the site where the Orbiter executable loads. That's contained within the Orbiter the Orbiter 100830.zip file that you will unzip. And then we will step through that. Then you will need to get your 2 data panels. The first is the Pilot data panel, which looks like the picture on the left. Second is the Flight Engineer, which looks like the picture on the right. They are both contained on the StudentAstronautChallenge.com website. Once you download them, place the Pilot one on the PC that your pilot will use. The Flight Engineer panel should go on the PC that your Flight Engineer will be using. Okay, now we need to set up the Orbiter 2010 software. So what you'll do to install the program, the Orbiter 2010 program, is you'll locate where you saved and downloaded the Orbiter 100830.zip file, and then you'll double click it and go through the extract process to create an Orbiter 100830 folder. Once you have that folder, you'll locate the Orbiter application that is contained within the folder. Just open the folder and you'll see a significant number of other folders and then programs. Down towards the bottom, you'll see one that's labeled Orbiter. It says Application, and it's got the Orbiter emblem. If you right-click that, it will allow you to create a shortcut icon. We highly suggest you move the shortcut icon onto the Mission Commander's PC desktop so it makes it very easy to start Orbiter. This is also where you will locate this same module when you're installing the sound file, and the sound file will step you through that. But when it says go to where Orbiter resides, that's what it means. It's the Orbiter 100830 folder, and then you click it, and it will go ahead and install the sound file. Okay, once you have Orbiter installed, if you double click the icon that we recommend you creating, or if you go into the Orbiter 100830 folder and double click the Orbiter application, the system on initial start will run 3 system tests. It does this to make sure that the PC and Orbiter are compatible. The test results screens look similar to the one on this panel. What you're hoping to see in the result field is 3 OKs. However, if you get any error or if it returns a result other than OK, it is not very difficult to fix. Just simply talk to your IT tech people and they can resolve them all quite simply. So once you have a clean bill of health, if you will, for your Orbiter verification, click the button in the middle of that screen that says Launch Orbiter. And then we can bring Orbiter up and we'll begin the customization process. Okay, when Orbiter is executed, it always comes up to this Orbiter Launchpad screen. Anytime you start Orbiter, this is what you'll get. On the left side, you'll see several tabs or boxes: Scenarios, Parameters, Visual Effects, Modules, Video, Joystick, Extra, and About Orbiter. Those are different segments that you can go into, and then in the center screen, it will display all the parts or the parameters related to those. So what you see right here is the scenarios. Those are all the scenarios contained within the Orbiter Flight Simulator program that you can run. Many of them deal with other types of spacecraft, other areas of the solar system, space stations, etc. The one area that we will be using is Space Shuttle Atlantis, but we'll get back to that. You can use the Launchpad to update any of the parameter files and then to select the scenario that you want to run by double-clicking the scenario and then selecting from the list. The first area we need to change is in the parameters file. If you click on the parameters button, you'll get to this displayed screen. Now, the only one we need to change is the generic MFD size. You'll notice it midway down the right-hand column. It's initially set to 6. We want to change it to 4. That makes the multifunction displays somewhat smaller on the screen, so they don't cover as much of the space field that you would see, and it makes it easier to identify things. Okay, after you make that change, then just click on the next one we want to change, which will be modules. Now, the module tab customizations, this is all the modules that you can load in Orbiter. If you click on the module, it will give you a description to the right-hand side of what that module does. Initially and minimally, you need to make sure you check Custom MFD, LUA MFD, Orbiter Sound, and EXT MFD plug-in modules. Now, if Orbiter Sound does not appear in your list, it's because you failed to install the Orbiter Sound module or it did not install correctly. If you go back and reinstall it and clear up any errors, then the sound module for Orbiter will appear here. Okay. After we do the modules, we'll go down and we'll click on the Video tab. And the Video tab lets us decide if Orbiter is going to run full screen or in windows. If you run it in a window, then you'll have the window outline like you do for any other window. If you run it full screen, then it takes over the entire screen. Now, we recommend full screen because it looks better. However, some systems, depending on what you're running, may have a problem running at full screen because it is very graphics oriented. So you can use window. What you need to do if you run full screen, select a screen resolution that matches the screen you're running on. 1024 by 768 is a pretty common one. If you have a bigger screen, it'll go up. 1920 by 1080 is a very large size screen resolution. You can play with the different resolutions and see what they do. If you're running it in Windows, then you take the resolution you would normally use and set that for your width and height, and you'll get the same effect. All right, the last thing we're going to change for our setup is the joystick. Now, if you have a joystick, want to use one, which we highly recommend because it certainly makes it easier for the mission commander to fly the simulator using a joystick than trying to use the keys, the arrow keys, and the number pad keys. You need to make sure you plug your joystick in first before you start Orbiter so it can recognize it. Then when you get to the joystick module, under the joystick device, you'll see a drop-down box. In this particular example, it says Logitech Extreme 3D because that happens to be the joystick I have in my system. You'll click on the drop-down box and your joystick should appear. Select it, and then that's all you need to do. You can do some calibrations with the throttle saturation and the dead zone if you want to. I highly recommend you leave those as the defaults unless you determine that you're having a problem. And then you can look in the manual and it gives you very good definitions and descriptions of those. So right now we have done all the customization we need to do for Orbiter 2010 to be ready for flight in the site type of environment we use for the flight simulation system in the Student Astronaut Challenge. Now that we have Orbiter installed and customized, we need to go ahead and start the individual components so that we can begin working on our flight training. Now, on the pilot PC, the pilot will need to locate the pilot data panel that they loaded earlier, start PowerPoint, and get the data panel up and running. Now, once the data panel becomes up for pilot, it will beep at you, and then it will come up and display a dark panel with a lot of data points and data entries across the top and on the bottom left and bottom right. And in the upper left corner, you'll see in red writing on a yellow background 00:05:00. That is the countdown clock. So that's reading T-minus 5 minutes because it's hours, minutes, seconds. Now, that's a T-minus 5 minute launch hold. That's where every shuttle flight for the Student Astronaut Challenge will begin. Once you get that done, then the flight engineer also needs to load their flight engineer data panels by either locating an icon put on the desktop for that or starting PowerPoint and finding the flight engineer data panels and loading them and getting them running. Now, the flight engineer panel, when it comes up, it will fill the screen, but it will be a very dark gray, black with dark gray at the top. And that's because the flight engineer data panel does not start running until T-minus 4 minutes when the flight engineer starts it. At that point, it will become filled with data and the gray boxes will become the system annunciator panel. Okay, once we have those set and running, we need to get the mission commander to get Orbiter started. So he'll double click on the Orbiter icon that we recommended placing on your desktop. And Orbiter will bring up the launch pad like we saw before in customization. Now, it comes up automatically in the scenarios tab. And so in the center of the launch pad, you'll see a list of all the scenarios that are available for the Orbiter system. Now, these are all folders. So what we want to do is locate the Space Shuttle Atlantis folder in the list of scenarios and double click it. That will open the folder and display all the lists of the flight scenarios available for the Space Shuttle Atlantis. The one we're interested in is the launch into sunrise. So click on the launch into sunrise, and then at the bottom of the orbiter launch pad, click the launch orbiter button. Orbital will then load, and once it finishes, it will take you to an external view of the space shuttle on the launch pad. Now, while it's loading, you may see a gray bar on the bottom of the screen, and that's fine. What that bar is the orbiter software will actually display every module that it's loading. If your graphics card can keep up with the quickness of the display, you'll see the individual names. If not, they'll just stack on top of each other and you'll see a gray bar. Either one's fine. It means it's working, and then it will come up to the external view of the shuttle. Now, the external view of the shuttle is very pretty, but it does us no good. We need to be able to see the cockpit view. The way you get to the cockpit view is on the Mission Commander's keyboard. You click the F1 button. That will switch you to an internal view of the cockpit. So F1 switches between internal view and external view. Okay, now that we have orbiter set up and running and we have an internal view of the cockpit, the mission commander needs to make a few adjustments to the right hand and the left hand multi-function display panels. They are the boxes in the lower left and right corner of the orbiter screen. On the right hand MFD, you'll click the box in the middle underneath it that says SEL, stands for select. Okay, once you do that, then the display will change and you'll have a list. In all the boxes on the sides, there'll be arrows. Inside the large MFD panel, you'll see different items entered. They represent different panels that can be displayed. You want to click on the arrow box next to the orbit selection, and that's usually the top left corner of the display. Then the MFD will then switch to the orbit Earth display, and it's set for launch. Now on the left MFD, the pilot or the mission commander will need to click on the select box again, and then look for the terminal MFD entry, which is usually in the lower, close to the lower right corner of the MFD panel. So you'll click on that, and then the box will change to the terminal MFD mode. Then you'll want to look for the box that has INP, and that stands for input. It's normally the top left-hand corner of the panel. Now, once you click on the INP box, an input script command pop-up box will open. That's contained within the middle of the screen. Now, this is where you'll need to type some commands. The first thing you want to do is type run double quote Atlantis / launch double quote, and that's all together. So it's run double quote ATLANTIS / LAUNCH double quote. Then press enter. Now in the terminal MFD, you should see the command echoed, and then you should see about 3 or 4 lines of green display that shows you that the orbiter program processed the command. Now, click the input again, get another pop-up box, and you'll type the command do _ OMS2 equals false. So that's DO _ OMS number 2 equals false. What this does is it turns off the second OMS burn because we don't need it in our simulations. Press enter again. You'll see the command echoed, but you won't see anything else because all this is doing is setting a bit switch. Now the last thing you do is you'll hit the INP box again, and then you'll type in launch open parentheses close parentheses. No space or anything. So it's LAUNCH open paren close paren. Now the important thing here is do not hit enter. All you want to do is launch and leave it sitting there. Now, leave everything alone with the keyboard and the mouse. Don't touch it again until T-4 seconds when you'll hit the enter key to execute the launch command. Once you do that, Mission Commander, the solid rocket boosters have lit, the shuttle main engines are lit, and you're on your way to outer space. So, good luck to all and enjoy your flight.